Giving birth in a U.S. hospital means giving birth in a system that too often takes a patriarchal approach to birth, takes away power from women over what happens in their own bodies, and can be racist. A really crucial and necessary part of navigating within that system is learning from the birth stories, the good, the bad, the ugly of those who've already given birth. And I'm not talking about the typical vlog, hospital-focused birth stories. I'm talking about a woman sharing her whole story, her hopes, her fears, how things unfolded from her perspective during her prenatal care, her labor, her birth, and the postpartum period. I'm Dr. Nicole Calloway Rankins, practicing board-certified OBGYN, mom of two, and creator and host of the All About Pregnancy and Birth podcast. I've been in practice for 20 years, and my passion and purpose is giving pregnant folks the information and tools they need to be calm, confident, and empowered to have the beautiful birth that they deserve. In this episode of the All About Pregnancy and Birth podcast, you're going to hear Megan's birth story and how knowing which questions to ask made all the difference in her birth. Now, Megan is a mother to Noah and wife to Joel. They are a military family currently located in the National Capital Region. Megan is a social worker by training, and she's passionate about mental health and helping people in trauma recovery. Megan enjoys reading, baking, as well as painting. Now, Megan is sharing her experience of moving cross-country during her pregnancy, having to find a new OB, and then needing to be induced at 39 weeks because of something called cholestasis, as well as PUPS. And although things didn't go exactly as she would have liked, she was ultimately very happy with her birth experience. And she says a huge part of that was the childbirth education that she had. So let's get into Megan's birth story, and be sure to stick around until the end, because after the interview, I'm going to give you my Dr. Nicole's notes, which are my top takeaways and recommendations as a practicing board certified OBGYN based on our conversation.
Thank you so much, Megan, for agreeing to come onto the podcast. I am so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much. I am very, very excited to be here today.
Yeah, so why don't you start off by telling us a bit about yourself and your family?
So I have been married for 5 years to my wonderful, incredible husband, Joel. We have a 10-month-old son who is just the best. His name is Noah. We're a military family. So we just moved to the National Capital Region. We're just outside of DC. Okay. And before that, we were in California. So we spent several years in California, and now we're in Maryland. I'm a social worker by training. Currently staying home with Noah and hanging out with him, and that's been a real joy. But I'm a social worker by training. I'm really passionate about mental health and helping people recover from trauma. So that's kind of my calling, and I miss doing that, and I'm excited to get back into that, hopefully here in the future. When I have free time, I know taking care of a kiddo is a lot of work, but when I have some free time, I enjoy baking. I really enjoy, I've actually been reading a lot, which is surprising. I thought once I had a kid that I wasn't going to be able to do that, but I've actually probably read more this year than I have ever before. And
that's cool.
Yeah. And I've become a pro napper. So I'm of the philosophy that when the baby naps, I nap. So usually in the afternoon, you can find us both taking a nap at our house.
Gotcha. And you can turn it on when you need to.
Yes.
All right. So let's hop right into it. So first, in order to understand what the birth is like, I think we always have to talk about what the pregnancy and the pregnancy care was like. So what was your pregnancy and prenatal care like?
Yeah, so mine was actually kind of interesting because I moved in the middle of my pregnancy. So we were in California when I found out I was pregnant, and we were there basically through my first trimester.
Okay.
And I was seeing an OB, just a single OB. And I had actually seen her the year prior when I had a miscarriage. I had a miscarriage at 7 weeks. And she was fantastic through that process. And so I obviously stuck with her. And so I saw her for my first trimester of care, and she was really great. She was very she would answer any of the questions that I had. She was very warm, but I discovered that she wasn't going to necessarily like volunteer or educate me myself. Like she was going to answer the questions that I had, but she wasn't going to volunteer a lot of information. So I had to know the questions to ask.
Gotcha.
So I learned that very early on. And then we moved, like I said, at the end of my first trimester, and I had no idea, like we had never lived in the area. And so I was looking for recommendations from people, that were local, that had, enjoyed their providers. So I went with a group, and I don't think I realized this when I first showed up, but it was a group of, OB-GYNs, nurse practitioners, and PAs. And so I didn't see the same person like at all. Like every time I went in, it was a different person. And so I wasn't expecting that, and I didn't love that. And so I had a conversation very early on when I had transferred my care, and I said, okay, like who's eligible to deliver my baby, And so they kind of explained like which providers were available. And so the front desk at that office was fantastic because they were able to schedule me with all of the doctors that were eligible to deliver. She's like, we never know who it's going to be because it's on call, and, babies come when babies want to. And so I was able to meet with a lot of the doctors. But it turns out the doctor that ended up delivering Noah, I had never met him before. So, I did my best. And it didn't quite work out how I had envisioned it, but, but my prenatal care, and I found the same thing was true once we had moved, that, they were going to answer any questions that I had, but I had to know the questions to ask.
Gotcha.
So I kind of, I took it upon myself to educate myself as much as I could.
So what did you do? What did you do to prepare for the process?
Yeah. So when I moved, I was in my second trimester, and I was like, okay, now's a good time to start exploring what birth looks like, what labor looks like. And so, I found the birth preparation course, and I was like, everybody needs to take this because this is amazing. So I went through that myself. I think later in my second trimester, I can't remember exactly. And I went through all the modules, and it was really, really helpful. So I did that. I read Ina May's Guide to Childbirth. When I couldn't sleep in the middle of the night, that was what I was up reading. And we did do labor and delivery education through our hospital. It was still virtual because of the pandemic, lingering.
Sure.
So it was like a 4-week virtual class that my husband and I did together. And it was good. It just wasn't super organized. That was one of the things that I really enjoyed about the birth preparation course, was like, it's very clearly like outlined it, like the succession of things made sense to me. And the hospital, it was great in its own right, but it was just a very different type of education.
Gotcha.
So we did that. And then I watched, I don't know how many like birth documentaries on YouTube, like just like birth vlogs, people out there, like, okay, my water broke and I'm going through contractions and now we're going to the hospital. So I watched a lot of that for more of the experiential piece of it, not necessarily like the data and the facts and that kind of thing. Sure. So I did a lot of that kind of research. And
you were prepared. Like,
yeah. And I'm sure some of that was probably me trying to, birth is such an unknown thing when you're a first time mom, and, people can tell you like, oh, this is what it's like, but you just have no clue, until you're there. And so I think that was my way of trying to take some of the unknown out of it, was to prepare myself and, educate myself as best I could for what was going to come.
Gotcha. And it sounds like you did just that. And I want to go back to it, what you were saying about your prenatal care, because something stuck out to me, that you really had to take it upon yourself to get the things out of it that you needed. And it wasn't that anybody was mean or anything. Part of it is probably just a way, unfortunately, that practices sort of work in the way that I don't think anybody intentionally like leaves things out. But it sounds like if you hadn't brought up questions, if you hadn't said, hey, can I be scheduled to meet all of the potential people, that those things wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I can empathize because I think when you're in a field and like, what you know, you don't necessarily know what other people don't know. And so it can be hard, when you have somebody who's new to your field, who doesn't know a lot, you just kind of assume that they know things. But yeah, it was hard, having to, like, come in with my list of questions every appointment.
Sure.
But I tried to work from a place of empowerment and really advocate for myself, for the things that I wanted and the things that I needed. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love it. Love it. Love it. So what are some of the things that you wanted for your birth?
So what I wanted and what ended up happening were very different things. But I didn't have a lot of like super specific things. It was more just kind of broad brushstrokes. I was hoping to labor at home as long as I could and then go to the hospital. I guess my overarching theme is kind of minimal medical intervention, but I'm not against medical intervention.
Sure.
So like for an epidural, I was like, I'm going to labor as long as I can. And then if I can do it without an epidural, great. And if I can't, that's okay. So I was kind of minimal intervention. That was kind of the goal. And I just really wanted to connect with my providers, and like, as anybody in a situation like that wants to be treated with dignity. And that definitely did happen. I will say, like, that all the providers, like all of the nurses, all of the doctors that I encountered over my very lengthy labor, they were all fantastic. And so, like I said, I didn't have a ton of like real specific things that I wanted, but just kind of I wanted to be more natural and not necessarily like, that was one of the things I learned when I was researching and learning, is like, I think a lot of people tend to treat pregnancy as like a medical condition versus like a natural part of life.
Absolutely. Yes.
So I think I fell in the camp of like recognizing like, this is a natural part of life, but like for sure, like, relying on medical intervention as needed.
Yeah. So then what happened with your labor and birth? Let's talk through it all.
Yeah. So I had a relatively like uncomplicated, very easy pregnancy until I hit like 37 weeks.
Okay.
And at about 37 weeks, I hadn't had stretch marks anywhere on my body until 37 weeks. And then these stretch marks popped up, and like literally overnight, I started getting this rash inside of my stretch marks. And I was like, what is this? And I'm so itchy. And so I went into my provider and I said, hey, look, like, here's what's going on. I'm super itchy. Please help me.
Right.
And so the provider that I saw, she was like, oh, this looks like something called PUPS. And I was like, what is that?
What are you talking about? Right.
Right. And so she kind of explained it to me, and she's like, if you have itching that spreads to other parts of your body, call us back and let us know. And she's like, basically, there's not much we can do for you. Like, just, like hydrocortisone cream, and that's kind of it. So I was like, okay. So I went home.
And let me ask, how bad was it? Was it like,
it was bad. It was bad. It was real bad. Like, it was real bad. I actually took a picture and I looked back at it and I was like, oh, like that's bad. Like that does not look comfortable.
Right.
And so within, I would say probably 48 hours after I had been to the doctor, like my entire body is itching, like my whole body. And like severe itching.
And you can't not scratch, like you're just.
Yeah, you can't not scratch it. And so I was like, because I didn't want to like break my skin. Obviously, I knew that wasn't like a good way to go. So I was taking like dish towels and like rubbing my stomach, like, it was very, very uncomfortable. And I tried everything. I tried like.
What'd you try?
I tried, I got a recommendation from my nurse to do like an oatmeal bath. So I tried an oatmeal bath, and the hot water would not gel with my skin. I was like, I'm on fire. It was not it. I tried doing hydrocortisone cream. I tried, oh gosh, the only thing that really slightly helped was ice packs. And it's like the middle of winter, and I am just like laying on the couch, like just covered in ice packs. Like that was really the only thing that helped me get any kind of relief. So I had like a rotating, thing of ice packs on my body. And
did
so I
you,
went.
Did you try Benadryl or anything? Or?
I did try Benadryl. Yes, I did try
Okay.
Benadryl, and that was not helpful.
Nothing.
So
Okay.
I went into my doctor again. I said, look, y'all, something is not right. Like,
Right.
we've got to do something. So the doctor, I
Right.
remember her saying very clearly, she's like, well, I don't think it's cholestasis, but on like the 1% chance that it is, like, let's go ahead and do your blood work. And I said,
Right.
okay, great.
Sure.
And so my test results came back the day after Thanksgiving. So everything was kind of on holiday hours,
right.
you know. And so I get my results back, and turns out I had cholestasis. So they called me in and they said, hey, you know, can you come in for an ultrasound and to do a stress test to like see how baby's doing?
Right.
Like, okay. So I like rushed to get to the hospital, and
this was the day after Thanksgiving.
This is the day after Thanksgiving.
Okay.
And like my mom was in town and we were trying to coordinate. It was chaos. It was chaos.
Right.
So I go to the hospital for my stress test and everything was fine. Like baby was fine. I was fine. So that was Friday, and they made the decision to induce me on Monday. And so I was hoping and praying. I was like, please let me go into labor naturally. Please let me go into labor naturally. So I was walking and doing all the things. I was just shy of 39 weeks when I found out I had cholestasis. So, so like I said, I was hoping that I was going to go into labor naturally, but I was just so miserable from all the itching that I was like, I can't, like, I just need something. I need some kind of relief.
Right.
So I went in on Monday morning at 7 a.m. Well, before that, I was like, I know I need to eat a good breakfast because I'm going to be in labor. I had my sights set on IHOP, and it was a 24-hour IHOP, and we showed up and it was closed. And I was so
like, sad. What is going on? Right.
I was so sad. I was so sad. So I was like, this is not a good sign. Like, this is not going to go well. Anyway, so we get to the hospital, and they check me in and everything, and they wanted to start Pitocin pretty much right away. And
were you already dilated some? Or
yeah. So let me back up. So I was dilated to 3 centimeters. And so I was very excited about that. That was on the Friday when I found out I got my cholestasis diagnosis, and they knew they were going to induce me. And so I was like, okay, this is not at all what I thought it was going to be. So over the weekend, my husband and I both sat down and watched the induction module on the birth preparation course. Cause I was like, okay, like this is the route we're going. Like, let's, let's do the things. And so I showed up to the hospital, and they immediately wanted to start on Pitocin. And so I said, look, I'm trying to do like a gradual on-ramp to this. Like, I'm not trying to, have all the big drugs right out of the gate. And so I asked about a Foley bulb, and I asked about like Cytotec. And so they said that I wouldn't be a good candidate for a Foley bulb because I was already dilated to 3 centimeters. But they were like, we can do Cytotec if you want, and like reassess, in a few hours. So I was really proud of myself that I was able to advocate for myself to get, like I said, what I wanted, because I wanted a gradual, on-ramp. So I had Cytotec, and I was having contractions when I was admitted to the hospital, but I wasn't feeling them. Like, they were reading on the monitor, but I wasn't feeling them. So they gave me Cytotec about 8:30, and I was hanging out, and they were like, yeah, you're like, you're not there yet. Like, you're having contractions, but I'm like bouncing and playing Yahtzee with my husband and like, like not knowing what is to come. So the doctor came back like that afternoon, early afternoon, and said, okay, let's go ahead and start Pitocin. I said, great, sounds good. So they gradually titrated me up on Pitocin, and probably around it gradually increased till about midnight. And at that point I was just getting so impatient. I was so like, just from the itching and from just being, I was like, okay, like let's move this along. So, they had offered to rupture my membranes a couple of times, and I declined. But then when they came in at midnight, I was like, sure, go for it. Like, let's do it. So they ruptured my membranes around midnight, and I was like, and labor really, really kicked in at that point. And I was like, okay, like this this is what I have been preparing for. This is, this is it. And so, I labored for about 4 hours, unmedicated, and just, did the best that I could, breathing and moving around and being on the bouncy ball. Like, I tried all of those things. And then I just got to a point, I was like, okay, I would really like the doctor to come check me. If I'm close, we'll keep going. If I'm not close, we're going to have to do something because I can't do this. So they checked me at like 4 a.m. and I was only at 6 centimeters. And I was,
that was great progress, but
I know. I was happy that I had progressed, but I was like, my threshold for like pain tolerance is rapidly declining. So, so I decided to opt for an epidural, and in hindsight, I'm very glad that I did that. That was the right choice for me. It was a very emotional decision. I like cried and cried, and bless the anesthesiologist. She was incredible. She was so great. And she was so patient and calm, and like, she was amazing. But I was a wreck. I was like, you're going to stick a needle in my back. Like it was a big deal for me.
Gotcha. And I'm sure your nurse was probably helping you too in the moment to kind of like,
to help kind of calm me down. And so I got my epidural at like 4:30 in the morning. And honestly, I really don't remember a lot from like 4:30 in the morning till I started pushing at like 2 p.m. I think I slept.
Did you fall asleep? Yeah.
I think I slept off and on. My husband was like, I was awake the whole time watching you. And I was like, well, that's great, because I was not awake watching you. Like, so yeah, things kind of progressed. And then around 2 o'clock, they came to check me, and I was complete. And I was like, yes, let's do it. We're finally like, this is, because I feel like when you're in labor like that, before you get into transition, like you're just kind of passively letting things happen. But then when you start to push, it was very empowering, actually. Like I was like, okay, like I can actually do something to really like help move this along.
And let me ask, before that time, were the nurses like moving you in different positions, or like the peanut ball or any of those things?
So I didn't use the peanut ball. The peanut ball did come into play while I was pushing, but I didn't use that a ton. But I was able to, like, on my side, I think they did help, even though I had the epidural. I think they let me get on the birth ball at one point just to kind of bounce. I think, the world kind of, it goes a little hazy when you're in labor. But they were helping me move around and kind of, reclining, sitting up, like that kind of thing. They were helping me do that. And so they come in, they say, hey, you're complete. We can start pushing. I was like, great. And the labor and delivery nurse that was there, she was fantastic. My only gripe with her, and I'm like, if you're a labor and delivery nurse listening to this, don't say this to your patients. I pushed like my first 2 contractions, and she's like, oh, you're doing so great. She's like, your baby's going to be here in like 30 minutes. Like you're going to be you're going to be totally fine. Like your baby's going to be here so soon. So I'm like, okay, 30 minutes. And I pushed for 2.5 hours.
Okay. So, So when you heard that, you got excited, like, okay, it's not much longer. And then it was a lot longer.
It was a lot. Yes. And so it was weird. Like it didn't feel like 2.5 hours to me. It definitely felt longer than 30 minutes. Cause I was like, okay, where's the baby? But it didn't feel quite as long. But I was just reaching the point of exhaustion. Like I had nothing left to give. And I actually was starting to consider like asking for a C-section, because I just like,
it was exhausting. Okay.
And I would have a contraction, and then I would fall asleep, and then I would wake up and push, and then I would fall asleep. Like I was just, my body was like, So the doctor came in, and he obviously saw that I was very tired, and he was really great. He was very calm. He was very direct and very concise, which is great to have when you're in the throes of labor. And he asked if I would be interested in a vacuum assisted delivery.
Okay.
And thanks to all the education and doing the birth preparation course, I already knew what that was.
Mm-hmm.
And so I asked him, I remember very clearly asking him, okay, talk to me about vacuum assisted delivery. What does that look like? What does that do for, my push time? Like, talk to me about that. And he explained the process, and it matched up with what I had learned before I had gone into the hospital. And I was like, yes, anything to help me get this baby out would be wonderful.
You're like, I'm ready. I'm ready to meet this baby.
Yes. And so they put the little suction thing on his head, and I pushed twice, and he was born. Like it was
pretty straightforward vacuum.
Oh yeah, it was very simple. I pushed once and he crowned, and then I pushed once and we got a shoulder, and then everything, came after that. And so obviously I was like just so relieved. And I remember the nurse saying, she was like, "Oh, he's gonna be a pretty like big baby. Like he's gonna be a heavy baby." And I was like, "Really? How do you know?" She's like, "I can just, they see lots of babies."
Right.
And so we did skin to skin for the first hour, which was amazing.
Did they do delayed cord clamping?
We did delayed cord clamping. Okay. That was one of our wishes. So they did delayed cord clamping. And they put him up on my chest, and it was actually kind of funny. They put him really high up on my chest, and I'm like looking, I'm like, I can't see him. Where is he? Like, and I was like, you're so close, I can't see you. Right. So we did skin to skin for the first hour, which was really great. And they weighed him, and so he was 9 pounds 5 ounces. Oh, so he was a pretty chunky guy.
Yes.
He was a
no wonder you were tired, trying to push that 9-pound baby out.
He was a chunky guy.
Oh my goodness. Did you have any tears at all?
So I had a 2nd-degree tear.
Okay, and that's not much. Yeah.
I again, with all the research that I had done before, I knew that was going to be a possibility. So I was kind of prepared just, for that. And I don't know, because I still had an epidural at that point, but I distinctly remember when they were stitching me up, I was like, this is really uncomfortable. Like, this is uncomfortable. Like, not just like pressure or like,
but pain, right?
But like
feel
painful.
Like the needle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I had to be like, y'all have got to do something. Like, so they gave me more meds to help with that, which was much better.
Okay.
So yeah, they stitched me up, and I was like, okay, this baby is here, and like now I'm a mom.
Yes, and I can't return him. So
right.
Like, he's yours. Yes.
So from the time that I walked into the hospital to the time I was born to the time he was born was almost 36 hours, just shy of 36 hours. So I knew from, again, all of the research that I had done that it could be days potentially. So I feel like for an induction, it wasn't bad, but when you're in it, it just feels like forever.
Right. It certainly can. It certainly can. It's like different people changing, and it's like, but I'm still here.
Yep.
I forgot to ask, did your epidural, could you feel some with your epidural, or was it super duper? Were you super duper numb, or do you remember?
I feel like, well, I remember like pushing the button for more drugs at several points, because I was like, I feel like I felt some. I was definitely not completely numb. Oh, and I do. So now that I'm like rehashing it again.
Yeah.
So I had back labor at one point, which I knew could be indicative of like baby's positioning. And so that's where the peanut ball came into play.
Got it.
Because I was like, y'all, my back is really hurting. Even though I had the epidural, I was like, my back is hurting. Right. So she flipped me onto my side, and we did the peanut ball, and probably, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 contractions later, it had resolved. And so they were everybody was very excited about that, because I was like,
he probably turned. Yeah.
So, yeah, the nurses were very helpful in getting my body into position because I was like, I can't, I can't do much of anything right now.
And did you breastfeed?
I did. So he was born with, was it low blood sugar, high blood? I think it was low blood sugar. He was
Low.
born with
Okay.
low blood sugar.
Okay.
And so we tried breastfeeding, and again, that's another thing that like you can read and people can tell you what it's like, but until you have a baby that's trying to latch,
It's
it's a totally
Yep.
different ballgame.
Yes.
So we tried that with like intermittent success. So we did have to supplement with bottles in the hospital for the sake of his blood sugar.
Sure.
And we were able to get that under control within the first 24 hours, which was really
Okay.
great because they were going to take him to the NICU for monitoring if his levels, you know, hadn't gotten to where we needed them to be. So
Right.
thankfully that was resolved and he got to stay with us the whole time, which was great. And so I met with a lactation consultant, I think twice in the hospital, and they were wonderful. I'm like, man, lactation consultants are like the angels. Like they're amazing.
100%.
They just know so much, and they've done like they've helped, they supported so many women, and so I really appreciated them. However, when we got home, because they had me on a nipple shield before they sent me home because they thought he had a high palate, which turns out he didn't have a high palate. We just weren't latching correctly. So I was on a nipple shield, and by day like 3, I'm in pain. My son's like screaming in pain, like he's not happy. No one's happy. And so I was like, I need help right now. Like I need someone to come to my house and help me. Like I need help. And I had that was a big, probably my biggest postpartum frustration was getting support breastfeeding because it feels so immediate, like urgent, like you need help. Like my baby's got to eat, but I'm in pain and they're unhappy. And my husband's looking at me like, well, I don't have those body parts. Like I can't help you, you know? And so I looked at like La Leche and I think the area that we live in too is also not well serviced with those kinds of resources. So I think that was part of it. But it was really hard. And so I actually ended up, one of the moms that went to our church came over and kind of helped me. Like she's not trained or anything, but she breastfed, you know, 3 or 4 kids. And so she has the experience at least. So she was able to come and help until we were able to schedule with the lactation consultant that was at our pediatrician's office. So she was like, I can see you, but I can't see you for like a week. And I'm like, okay,
and you're like, what am I supposed to do?
What am I supposed to do for a week? So yeah, it was a really big struggle. The first like 3 weeks, honestly, were really, really, really hard. And I was like, why am I doing this? Like, do I quit? You know? And so I stuck with it, and I'm glad that I did. And he was growing, gaining weight sufficiently. And so we breastfed till about 4 months. And then I just started having issues with supply. Like he was eating more than what I could produce. And so we started supplementing. And then eventually, just for my mental health, I was like, we're going to have to call it quits. And that was a really big decision for me. I was very sad about it, but it was the right decision for me. Like as soon as I decided to like stop pumping and trying to supplement bottles, I felt so much better. Like it would, and it just was, I was like, oh, I can hand a baby to you to feed. I can hand a baby to you to feed. Like it wasn't all on me to be the person feeding. So I was really grateful that, you know, that I made the leap after it was all said and done. It was an emotional decision, but it ended up being the right one for me.
Yeah, that's always a tough one. I went through something similar myself, and even though you know, like the baby's gonna eat, the baby's gonna be fed, it's still hard. So yeah. And then when did you see your doctor postpartum? Was it not until 6 weeks?
It was not until 6 weeks. And I knew that was like standard. And my postpartum appointment, like it was just so like nonchalant, I guess, or it was just very basic. It was, thankfully I had a really good postpartum recovery. Like my physical recovery, by the time I was at my 6-week appointment, I was, I won't say like 100%, but I was pretty close. Like I had a very good recovery.
Sure.
But even though, I don't know, I just feel like I'm like, ask me about my day. Like, let me tell you about my kid and how, like, how many times I'm getting up at night, or like, just and also like, I think I know this is something they screen for, is like, postpartum depression. And I think the questionnaire, has its place, but I'm also like, have a conversation with me. I don't think I had postpartum depression at that point. I think mine was a little later of an onset, like closer to like probably 5 or 6 months postpartum. But it just felt very like routine or mechanical. Like, here's this questionnaire. Okay, I'm going to ask you this question, this question, this question. Okay, you're great. Okay, we're going to like send you on your way. So, yeah, I think it would have been great to have something at like 2 weeks, because I remember calling my doctor and I was like, my feet are swollen. Like my feet are real swollen. Like, why are my feet swollen? And so it would have been nice to have a touch point at like maybe 2 or 3 weeks to answer those kinds of questions. But yeah, I got the 6-week standard follow-up, and it was pretty standard.
Yeah. And that's just, we have to redo postpartum care in the United States. It's just really bad. There's just no way around it. It's just bad. When you hear other countries and they're like, oh, a nurse comes to your house and this, that, it's like, wait, what?
It's one of those things that like I never paid attention to, because I've never been in, a postpartum season before. And so it's like, you don't know until you're there. And now that I've been through that, like I had a friend who got pregnant right before our son was born. And so I kind of got to walk with her through her pregnancy and trying to encourage her, to advocate for herself and do the things, that I felt like I had taken away from my journey. But I was like, yeah, postpartum care is going to be minimal.
You're basically on your own. It's sad, but not, at least from the medical system perspective. Yes. You're pretty much on your own, unfortunately. So yeah. So, how do you feel overall about your pregnancy and birth experience?
So my pregnancy, like I said, the first large portion of it was pretty unremarkable, very, run of the mill. The last 2 weeks were brutal. Like they were very uncomfortable, and I had a hard time getting relief from all the itching, and it was really, really hard. So, and that is a big factor in us considering to get pregnant again, is like, I know that I can't get pups again, but cholestasis has a decent recurrence rate. And I'm like, man, one of the nurses in the hospital, she's like, yeah, I got it at like 16 weeks and had it, and I was like, oh, that doesn't sound pleasant for me. Like, I'm glad I got mine at least later, but if it's possible to get it earlier, anyway. But as far as my like birth experience went, it wasn't, in some ways it wasn't what I envisioned, but I'm overall happy with how it went. And I think the biggest contributing factor to that was the fact that I had done so much research and educating myself that I kind of knew, I didn't know it necessarily the exact path that we were going to take, but at each decision that had to be made throughout my labor process, I knew, oh, my option is either this or this. And I felt like I could relatively know what to expect between the two. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to choose this option. And I think that really helped me feel empowered. And it wasn't just like I was in the hospital having this baby and all of these people are making decisions for me. It was very, it was an empowering experience for me. So
you were an active participant in the process.
So overall, I am happy with it. And I think, I got my sweet little baby boy, and he's the best.
So as we wrap up then, what is your one thing or one piece of advice that you would give to folks who are pregnant now?
Oh man, that's like a big question.
I know everybody always says that.
Yeah, I would say, have your expectations of what you desire for your birth, but hold those things very loosely, and try to just go with the flow as much as you can.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that, and then educating yourself as much as you can on all of the different things that could potentially happen. As far as interventions, I think that knowing what your options are can help you feel like you're more able to go with the flow. If you kind of know what's available, you can kind of, to a certain degree, pick and choose kind of,
Sure.
what you're comfortable with. And, yeah, like I said, have your desires and make your wishes known, but hold them with very loose hands.
There you go. There you go. All right. So where can women connect with you? You can say nowhere if you're not anywhere.
I was thinking, I saw that and I was like, yeah, via email, I guess.
No, it's totally fine. If anybody wants to reach out to you, they can reach out to us. I don't like to put people's emails like in my,
okay, perfect.
Because it invites spam and all of those kinds of things. But, totally fine. Well, thank you so much. This was a great conversation. I am so grateful that you came on. You have such lovely energy, and
thank you so much.
Just a joy to talk to you. And I'm grateful that I could help, that you were part of the birth preparation course too.
Yes, so. I am so grateful that I found you and found your work. And I'm very grateful for practitioners like you that really try to approach the whole pregnancy and labor and delivery process through a place of empowerment. I'm very grateful.
Wasn't that a great conversation? Megan has such lovely energy, and I so enjoy talking to her. And I'm really grateful that I got to be part of her birth experience because of the birth preparation course. Now, after every episode where I have a guest, I do my Dr. Nicole's notes, which are my top takeaways and recommendations based on my knowledge and expertise as a practicing board certified OBGYN based on the conversation that we had. So here are my Dr. Nicole's notes from my conversation with Megan. Okay, so in the episode, we didn't really talk about what exactly is PUPS and what exactly is cholestasis. So I want to tell you what that is right now. PUPS stands for Pruritic Urticarial Papules and Plaques of Pregnancy. And it's a rash that happens during pregnancy. It's itchy. It's often bumps that tend to form in the stretch marks on your belly. Sometimes it can spread to other parts of your body. Now, this condition does not harm you. It does not harm your baby. It usually does not require any medical treatment, but you do often need something to help with that intense itching. Cholestasis, on the other hand, is a little bit different. The long name or full name for it is intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy. And cholestasis is a condition that actually originates in the liver, tends to happen later in pregnancy. And this condition can also trigger intense itching like PUPS. However, typically with cholestasis, there is no rash, and also the itching occurs on the hands and the soles of the feet, but it can occur in other parts of the body as well. Now, the thing about cholestasis that's different from PUPS is that with cholestasis, there is a greatly increased risk of stillbirth. So we recommend labor induction when you have cholestasis. Okay, so that was PUPS and cholestasis. Let's move on to the next Dr. Nicole's note. So one of the things Megan mentioned is that her doctor was great and they would answer questions, but they weren't really volunteering information or spending any time educating. She needed to know what questions to ask. And let me tell you, this is very typical in the way prenatal care is provided today, especially by physicians. Unfortunately, doctors are busy. They often have too many patients scheduled that's actually not in their control, and they don't have a lot of time for education. Education is often relegated to a pamphlet that's handed out that nobody really reads, right? So you really need to know what questions to ask. And that is why childbirth education is so important. I will die on the hill that every person having a baby needs to invest in some quality childbirth education. Of course, I have an option, the birth preparation course. That's my online childbirth education class. You can check out all the details at drnicolerankins.com/enroll. However, I believe so strongly in childbirth education. If you don't take mine, take something. There are lots of options out there. Find something that works for you. Childbirth education is going to help you know what questions to ask so you can go into your appointments ready and prepared. All right. So definitely invest in childbirth education. And then another thing that Megan said, I don't know if you heard this and were like, oh my God, or maybe you didn't catch it or you did. She said that she pushed for 2.5 hours. That is really pretty typical or not atypical for a first baby. Actually, pushing for up to 4 hours with an epidural is considered within the realm of normal. That's another thing that childbirth education will help you with. It's going to help you understand what to expect, what's typical, what's atypical when it comes to labor and birth. Okay, and then the final Dr. Nicole's note. Postpartum care in this country just straight up sucks. Okay, it just sucks. All right, we know this. It's terrible. We typically have a 6-week postpartum check with your OB, and then there's not much help in between with that in terms of really supporting you in the postpartum period. We're trying to make some changes and make sure you have some contact before then, but the reality is that it's typically going to be that 6-week checkup, and you're not going to get much help before then. Now, one of the things that you very well may need help with before that 6-week checkup is breastfeeding. I always called breastfeeding a labor of love. It can definitely be challenging. And I love how Megan had a friend who could come over and help her when she had an urgent need for breastfeeding. Now, one of the things that you can and should and must do is identify a lactation consultant, okay? You can identify a lactation consultant, or should, during your prenatal period, so you have that person's information ready for you when you need it. Yes, you're going to see a lactation consultant while you're in the hospital, right? Or you should, most hospitals do, but you may need that help afterwards. So you want to check with your insurance company, see what options they offer for a lactation consultant, see what their availability is to help you in the moment. And then, like Megan did, maybe you can identify a friend or someone in your community who can also be a quick go-to resource when you need some of that urgent assistance and care. Remember, it's so much better to have these things lined up and not need them than to be struggling in the moment and trying to figure out what to do. Okay, and the last thing I'm gonna say about breastfeeding is it's okay if you stop. Do the best that you can, but it's okay if you stop. If you find that it's better for your health and your mental health for you to stop breastfeeding. Because remember, you have to be your best self in order to take the best care of your baby. That's the number one requirement for a healthy baby, is a healthy mom, healthy parent, okay? So we know that breastfeeding has a lot of benefits, yes, of course, but a fed baby is the best baby, all right? So it's okay if you stop, and don't beat yourself up about it. I know it's hard. We always beat ourselves up when we don't do things that we would like to do. I still beat myself up over the fact that I stopped breastfeeding, or I had trouble breastfeeding with both of my children, even though they're like healthy teenagers who are perfectly fine now, okay? Not just fine, great now, all right? But give yourself some grace. It can be a challenging process, and it is okay if you stop. All right, so there you have it. Do me a solid, share this video with a friend. Sharing is caring. I am on a mission to reach and serve as many pregnant people as possible, and I would so love your help in doing that. So share this with a friend. Also subscribe to my channel so you never miss a video. And then do check out all the details of the birth preparation course if you're looking for childbirth education. That is drnicolerankins.com/enroll. So that is it for this episode. Do come on back for another one. And remember that you deserve a beautiful pregnancy and birth.